Welcome to Dylan Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Sessler. Today is episode 16. I've got an incredible guest lined up for you. It's gonna be awesome. But before we get to our guest, I got to promote myself. I got a brand new audiobook. Defy the Darkness is on Audible now. So if you're going for those long drives, just pop it in your ear for 5 hours and listen to my wonderful voice. It'll be great. And lastly, don't forget to join my inspirational text platform. I send daily texts, mostly kind of perspective focused, inspiration focused, trying to get you through your day, trying to think about how to overcome the issues that you have and working through it on your own time. Just go ahead and text hi to 1-608-336-4480. It's in the description. You can always find it there. Now, my guest today is without a doubt an inspiring storyteller. I found him on TikTok a long time ago. Been following him for a long time. He has almost 350,000 followers and now over 7 million likes on TikTok, mostly sharing tributes of some of the most heroic military figures in history. And as a U.S. Marine combat veteran, my guest has a way of carrying forward the memories of those we have lost in a way that is so incredibly memorable. And I want you to meet this guy, Terry Kim. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, brother? Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. So Terry, I know I introduced you, but that an introduction never gives you enough of who a person is. So give me a little bit of understanding. Like, we didn't really talk about your background and where, you're a Marine. That's all I know. So give me an understanding of your story. Where did you come from? Why did you start doing the TikTok thing like I started doing? So tell me things.
Yeah, man. The way I look at it, I'm born and raised in New York City. I joined the Marines right after high school. It's like many, and that was pretty much my first time seeing the world, right? Joining the military, being outside of New York, going to boot camp, and then going to California. That's where I was stationed at in 29 Palms. And then going to 29 Palms, I landed in Palm Spring Airport, and first time I saw my first palm tree, I was like, oh man, it's so freaking awesome. So like life, the military, I love it. I love the military. It showed me life, and it was like a stepping stone. I was always infatuated with the military, right? Ever since I was a kid. The guns, the planes, everything about it. And then being a Marine, joining the military, it just connected everything, right? Like, oh man, it is true. It is awesome. Yeah. It is awesome. No matter what, it is miserable. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Right? Everybody can agree. It's the love facts. And hate. Yeah. And you do the most raw. It's life. I think it shows you a part of life that you'll never get to experience if you don't I don't know, right? It's just such a crazy experience.
Absolutely.
And it's different for everybody too, but for the foundation of it, they got it, a good formula. So everybody experiences pretty much the same foundation, whether it's right. Basic training, boot camp, and all that stuff. And then, you're going to have different specific experiences, right? But in the big macro sense, or the big scheme of things, we're all brothers and sisters, right? Because we all go through that same trials and tribulations. I always believe if we go through something, like some kind of hardship together, it creates a stronger bond. It always does, no matter what, Yeah. And regardless if we were there together, right? Like, we didn't share the same experience at the same moment, same time, same day, but we understand each other. It's just like, yeah. So I love that about that. There's a connection that we all have,
and it's so raw, right? Like, it never have I ever met another kind of person than a veteran that we can become so fundamentally close instantly, right? Like, yes. We have never met before. We've barely talked on, messaging back and forth, but we come on, and we just start talking about life. Like, it's no big deal. Like, we know, you always seem to know who a veteran is before you ever meet him. Like, I just knew that this conversation was going to go this way. And I love how you put it, like, that life, right? Like, is the military life is very much a representation of how hard life can be, but how much of a, how enjoyable it can be. Like there's such a dichotomy there where it can be so fucking hard.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, that hardness creates something that can never be experienced anywhere else. And you're absolutely right. That's such a
Yeah.
powerful statement.
What you just said reminded me, like, when I remember just being in boot camp and I was starving. It was at night, you were going to sleep and you just burn so many calories.
Yeah.
And I'm just so hungry, I remember. And that's when I realized I was 19 at the time. And I was like, how much I wanted a Snickers bar. I wanted a Snickers. And that's when I really appreciated things, like when you can't have it. And that's where I learned. I'm like, okay, now I am starting to understand, life a little bit, right? Like,
Yeah.
we take things for granted. We always hear it, but
Right.
really truly understanding, experiencing those little things, those little moments is a great awakening, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And how long were you in the Marines?
I did 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And
what told you to get out?
So joining the Marines, I just always wanted to go into combat. I was just like, train. My brother was a Marine, and he was in Iraq when I was joining. He has 3 deployments under him. So I wanted to join that fight, right?
Yeah.
I want, if you see your brother fighting on the street, or even a close friend, you join that fight, and no questions asked.
Yep.
That's how it was for me. Same thing, I wanted to serve my country. So wanting to go to combat and experience combat, especially training after it, so hard for it and wanting it. Right. And then I didn't get to go. I went to Japan. I went on a UDP. It's called a unit deployment program where you get to go to Japan and you go to like Thailand. We went to Thailand. Amazing experience, and I'll never forget it. And during the end of that deployment, that's when I got the an email from my staff sergeant. And he's like, "Hey, you want to go to Iraq?" Hell yeah. I'm like, that's, because and then that's when
what we trained for. Yeah,
exactly. So the first 4 years in the military goes by quick, right? I think, because you get your foundations, and then for the first year and the next year, it's just like pretty much you just kind of fit in to your unit. And if you could fit in the deployment, that's what I did, right? That's what happened for me. And then I squeezed in a non-combative deployment to Japan and Thailand. And it's like vacation. I don't want to call it vacation, but it was because there was a lot of misery,
right?
But a lot of great experience for this, like that kid that came from New York that never left,
right? And
getting to see the world again is such a crazy experience. So that opened up my eyes. And then going to Iraq, after I came back, it was tiring, right? You're mentally and physically tired. Just like, man, especially if we were fighting, and we lost some people, and people got hurt. Some Marines got hurt too. And it's very stressful, right? Just I don't have to say that, right? It's a stressful time. And it was just tiring. But so by the time I got back from Iraq, I only had like a few months, maybe like 4 or 5 months till I EAS. So it was a decision that I had to make, because the unit that I went with, they're going to Afghanistan after coming back. They had 6 months of training, and they're going to go right back to Afghanistan.
Jeez.
I wanted to go. They was like, they're like, "Hey, Kim, come on, come with us." I was like, "Damn, I have to re-up then," or extend at least, right? And that was the decision. And during that time, what went through my mind was, I really wanted to go. Did I think if I went, I might have died too? Of course, right? There's a chance, huge chance, because the unit that did go, they suffered. We suffered so much casualties during the first couple of months. I believe like 25 either died or just like that in the first couple of months. People that I knew who I just deployed with. So Afghanistan was a rough deployment for them. Of course I didn't go. What made me get out is just being so tired. But one thing that really got me was the fact that life in the Marine Corps or even the military goes by so fast. It goes by so fast because we're always doing something. There's always something to do. You have to report somewhere. And I loved it, but it just went by so fast for me that I felt like, man, this life that I just experience. Remember I told you, it was like, man, I'm just experiencing everything new. As much as I love the Marine Corps and the military and the country, like I wanted to experience life too, and I wanted to see what else was out there for me.
Right.
I remember seeing my staff sergeant. He was, I think, 26 at that time, fairly young if we're looking back.
Yeah.
But as like a 21 year old, 22, 26, and 27 looks very, very old. He
Right.
looked old too. That's how I was like, oh man, I don't want to be my son. I love my staff sergeant, but staff sergeant Chevy, but I was like, man, life goes by fast in the military. It felt like it. So I wanted to, I'm an explorer, I want to say, and I wanted to explore new things, what college was like and all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And being in 29 Palms, which is like straight up desert in California, especially at that time, my mind was like, man, I don't think I'll ever get a girlfriend out here either. I,
Right.
I was single for a really long time, man. And, it's like, well, all these, there's many variables, but the big thing was like, I want to go see life. It might be a little selfish in a sense. I felt like too. I thought, it's like, man, my boys are going to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But then I was like, hey, I had boys while I was in Iraq leave in middle of deployment because they're
Yeah.
They did that. So like, so they're like, oh yeah, I'm leaving in 2 weeks in the middle of the deployment. I'm like, damn, lucky, it's very lucky and good on them.
It's part of the job, right?
Yeah. So that's my thing. I wanted to experience life and see what else is out there. But one thing that led me to TikTok is I always felt like the story needed to be told though. Because what I saw, I find myself as like an average Joe. I'm like, I'm not nothing, I'm nobody special. I'm not like Jocko or some Navies. I'm just an average Joe that went through that raised my hand, maybe like an idiot. But
I want to interrupt here because you know what's remarkable about this is that I love this. I love when people do this in front of me because you say you're just an average dude, but you're not. That's why nearly 350,000 people follow you and you have over 7 million likes on TikTok because you're not just average, right? Like there's people that will never realize that would have never realized the stories that you shared if you had never done what you've done, which to me, like that makes you a hero in your own way. And I know you probably look at it and you say, I fucking hate that idea because what did I do? But the reality is that you've made an impact and that's what heroes do.
True.
Right? You've done that. Like, and people won't forget the stories that you've told because they're out there. They're in the world now. They're on the internet. They're on the line, right?
Yeah.
And
it's there.
And that makes you fundamentally a hero.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Like I don't know if you needed to hear that today, but like you need to hear that today, right?
I appreciate that, brother. It got me.
Because you have to keep doing what you know is right for you. And that like that's what a hero is, right? Like that's the stories that you tell. Someday someone's going to tell your story.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I hope so.
It's gonna be
I mean,
cool.
so I hope so. I mean, yeah, I don't, like thinking about that, like I don't like talking about myself really,
Yeah.
I like talking about other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little weird.
Oh, it's good.
I'm not used to talking about myself, but yeah. So the story. I definitely needed to tell people like, whoa, this is like the craziness, the madness, and all the funny.
Yeah.
I love laughing and stuff like that. I never laughed so much being in the military. Right. maybe it's like the environment we're in, such a shitty environment that laughing it makes
best coping skill. Yeah.
Right. I never met so many funnier people around me. So I love telling stories like that. Those stories might not be as exciting, but I tell those stories more personally to my friends and family. Like, oh yeah, this kid, I know, but these big stories, man, like I want to tell them because I need to tell people that these people exist.
Yeah.
So many people don't know that we have. Again, to me, they might have been regular Americans, like just regular people that raised their hands, but did extraordinary things,
Right.
like, you know, like running into things that people normally would not do. Well, first of all, normal people wouldn't raise their hands and join the military.
Right.
So it's a pretty, you know, and rightfully so. I understand, you know, I don't down anybody that, you know, I I respect it too at the same time. Like, shoot, you know. Um,
If my recruiter had been honest about what I was going to see in Afghanistan in 2012, I would have said fuck no.
right.
Because I like we don't know what we're getting into, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a recruiter's fault. Like he's just got to do his job, right? And somebody's got to recruit. But the reality of war is that the calling for people like myself and like you for us to go there has almost nothing to do with the military and everything to do with what we're running away from. I think is that so many in my experience, and I've 14 years almost. In my experience, there's so many people running away from a lack of connection to find that connection. And we've been talking about it, right? Like you've never laughed so much in your life in the military, right? Like it's true. It's true for me. Like I'm a funny guy, but guess what? Like the military brings out a side of funny within me that is completely different, right? I don't know how. Like I try to be as consistent as I can wherever I go. The military is the military. These people do not give a shit about your judgment, right? Like they don't care about judgment. Like tomorrow they could die, so they're going to have fun today and not care about like if you got a problem with me, let's deal with it. Let's get it over with because tomorrow we might die and I don't want you to have that on your conscience, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just a connection that is made and forged in these terrible moments that we have to deal with that cannot be recreated. And it's this so many people just come to it. But if we knew, if we really knew, it'd probably be a no.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say maybe a side of me knew a little bit because I mean maybe we no, technically you don't know. You never know. You'll never know
Right.
until you experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You know, but there's still a sort of, it takes a character.
Yeah.
It takes somebody to raise their hand and still do it. You know,
Right.
even if you don't deploy. I know so many friends of mine that never deployed, and then fine. That's, you know, and it's the fact that you're crazy enough to raise your hand to join. You know, you know, I don't want to call them crazy, but you know, there's other people do see that way, like, oh man, it's pretty crazy.
I feel like it's either crazy or ignorant.
That's true. Yeah,
I
you're right.
was ignorant
I was
and
very ignorant.
maybe a little crazy too.
I think both. Definitely, I had both of those ingredients
Right.
that made me.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, right? Like and even me looking back, it's like if I had known, like there's definitely a lot of me that says no, but there's also like I look around those glaring problems and situations that I had to deal with and had to see that if you look around everything else, you're like, I would have missed out on a lot of who I am right now. And
Definitely.
I'm happy with who I am, right? Like
Definitely.
I'm really proud of what I've done. And for most of my life I wasn't. And the military taught me in many ways to have pride for myself, to have respect for myself, to, you know, the sense of courage and integrity both were created and I shouldn't say created, but very much molded to be what they are because of the values the military has taught me.
Definitely.
And I mean, it's hard to say, like, if I had known only the bad stuff, I would have said no. But if I had known all of it, like if I knew I was going to get where I am now,
Right.
it'd be a yes for me. So it's like, it's weird.
Exactly. I'll never, you know, that question is like, oh, if you could go back in time and change that, I won't change anything. I can't change anything because I'm glad that again, what you said, I'm glad who have become. It was a struggle, you know, because first I went in as as like you said, like ignorant almost, like, you know, you don't know anything. And like, again, there's no life experience, real life experience. Coming out was even more experiences, right? Because after that, I had a struggle. Like, there was a struggle period with like PTSD and all that stuff. And oh man, you know, one thing with the military, I especially, you know, I never experienced death before joining. So that was one thing that you experience in life, which is very important in life, is to experience death, the end of it too, right? And it hit me. I never had anybody die around me. You know, so it's, and, you know, no, and I didn't have a grandparents that died, that passed away. I didn't have anybody close to me that died, and made me like super sad. Until I got out. I mean, until I got in, and that's when I first went to my first funeral. You know, my sergeant died, and so, and all that stuff. So that's all these experiences that I had. So life experience, including death, was all there, especially combat. I think it was one of the best thing that I think you know, war has taught me was trying to build a good relationship with death. You know, have a good relationship with death.
Yeah.
Because I always believe, and I just got there. So it took me, after getting out, took me about like another 10 years to like get my mind right, you know, to where I'm today. I'm like, because before I was just like all over the place. I still a little chaotic. All that chaos was still in me. And it just took time. It took a lot of time.
What was it that helped you kind of put the pieces of that together?
Man, man, every time I don't know, you know, there's so many things like I tried suffering. Going, I just had to suffer. You had to go, you have to suffer. You're gonna suffer. You can't avoid the suffering. But it's self-awareness, I think, was the biggest thing. Understanding true self-awareness. Why is this happening? You know, is this stoppable? Is this treatable, curable, or stoppable? Is this something, you know, because I that's what I try to search for. It was like, I didn't just stick with meds. I tried everything. First of all, I knew there was a problem. I didn't look for help. For like, oh, can you help me? I looked at, you know, within myself. I don't know if everybody can do that. So it's tough, right? It's very tough, especially if you have depression and you know, if you're suicidal, especially. It's a tough game. It's a tough road. So you have to suffer though, and some people just suffer too much, you know, and that suffering is just, you can't deal with it. But I tried everything. You know, I really like a lot of meditation, you know, and these are recent ones that really got me to really, okay, understanding myself, like why, understanding, like before I wouldn't want to talk about war, you know, now I can like post it on internet too at the same time. So I like that achievement, you know, and it's not about me. Self-awareness is one of the biggest things, is to understand, you know, we're this small, you know, everything else is so much bigger than you. And that's how it always was in the military, right? I think we forget about that, because that's why you have so many people sacrificing themselves for the mission, for their buddy next to them, for, you know. So we always understood that. I think after either you get out of the Marine Corps or military, you kind of lose these you know, this training and this integrity that you have within yourself. You lose that because of all this chaos. You're kind of released into this world, into the real world, you know, because being in the military, you're kind of confined into this, very organized, especially being on base. I felt so safe being on base. When I got out, that I remember when I came from California, came back to New York. I remember waking up the next morning and I felt lost. I just felt lost because I had no one to report to. After 4 years of doing, you know, having a routine, like such a strict routine too, and a strict environment like the military, I got lost. I felt lost. I almost pointless. if I look back right now, it's always almost pointless. Like, what do I do?
Right.
And I didn't understand that you know, that emotions, you can control happy. I should have been happy. Oh man, you know, what a great, it was beautiful morning too. I remember the sun was, it's nice weather. I just remember I was like, but I was confused. Like, what do I do? And that confusion confuses you more. And then that's how I think a lot of people spiral down. That's what happened to me. So I drank a lot. I would drink a lot. I would go out and fight. Just madness. You know, just maybe a lot of guilt. You know, especially after combat, right? There's a lot of guilt. Survival skill I learned. So, you know, I try to learn why it's happening, and then you try to piece it together. And it's always going to be sad. You're always going to, I think back on, you know, all the stuff, all the people who died too. Even just reading these stories, it breaks me. So that's why sometimes I just have to, like, I sometimes can't do it every day sometimes, you know. It's like being, you know, one of those Facebook moderator, like, you know, that you ever heard about that job where they have to like check for dick pics and stuff like that every day, and that could mess them up. They look at blood and dead pictures, like people, you know, constantly. It will mess you up. This doesn't mess me up that much. I'm just saying, you know, but it's not to that extent.
It's hard though.
It's still like, it still breaks my heart. You know, I cry, you know, just when I'm reading the story to make the story, I'm like, man, that stuff, because I know what it was like to be in a position in that where that Marine or soldier or airman, whoever, right, was, because it's a stressful and shitty situation already. And then what made, you know, like what makes them do that one thing above and beyond,
right?
It like, that brings a tear to my eye, because you're like, no matter how shitty and miserable or situation you're in, you still had the fortitude to be like, F this, I'm gonna go in, even though you might not be able to. Let's say the story is some burning Humvee, he runs in there. Many people won't.
Right.
It's sad.
Absolutely. I think that makes you a fucking awesome human being.
Yeah, it does.
Because that's, I mean, the ability for you to be honest about that is just, it's a testament to what you've had to go through, and how much you recognize your need to feel as being fundamentally important to you.
Oh, you're talking about me. I thought you're talking about, you know, the person doing the awesome thing is an awesome human being. I was like, talking about you. I appreciate that.
I like talking about you because you don't like talking about you. So I'm gonna do it for you. But no, man, like that. I mean, because people are gonna look at this episode, right? And they already know where to find the tributes to the heroes. But there's a lot of people that are gonna look at you and recognize themselves. They're going to relate to you because you're telling people all the things that they already are thinking about that you've done, right? And the ability for a Marine, right, just a random Marine out on the streets, to see this video and look at you and recognize, like, you know, the importance of understanding how fundamental emotions are for people. Well, they've got a Marine right in front of them telling them, right? And showing them, and one that respects the culture and respects the heroes and respects the, you know, that this person has done this, and I got to feel for that. Because in a sense, it's not just about you, right? Your feelings aren't just about how you feel. They're about giving that recognition and that appreciation to that person that sacrificed.
Definitely.
And this random guy is going to watch this video and recognize that within himself. And he's going to start being able to justify doing the right thing for himself, rather than going out drinking, rather than, you know, getting into drugs because he doesn't know how to handle the chaos. And that's like the people that I want to bring on this podcast, that this is it, right? I want to share people that sometimes don't even recognize themselves as heroes, right? And people that have gone through the process of understanding themselves, right? The self-awareness. I mean, it's such a profound word, self-awareness, that we just don't recognize enough. You know, like if there's something that needs to be taught in school, self-awareness. because it's the place where oftentimes people realize the wrong thing because they don't have self-awareness.
Definitely. I
And
think also, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Cut you off real quick. Self-awareness too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not as self-aware. What I've learned to be self-aware is that before I thought I was self-aware.
Right.
I'm just being more self-aware that I'm not self-aware, because
Absolutely.
that's like a mind trick, right? It's like you have to understand that we have so many blind spots, and we're always trying to be I'm trying to understand now instead of trying to be understood,
Absolutely.
and that brings me more to peace, trying to understand. If I understand somebody, that stops hate, because I understand. That's how I think hate is always taught, no matter what. It's not like we're born with it. It's not a DNA. It's what we experience, and or somebody taught us to not like somebody or whatever.
Yep.
And these are the things I'm trying to understand. Life. This is life, right?
Yep.
Like why do this group hate this group, and why are they fighting? And it's because I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, it's a huge thing of people not really knowing each other. If they knew each other, right? It's almost that simple. And that's how I'm like, whoa, life is actually a lot simpler than we make it to be. It's a lot simpler.
Yeah.
We make it a lot chaotic, I feel like.
It's funny you say that, because I've been talking to clients more often lately that I'm like, what I do is pretty simple, right? Like I help people understand perspective. I help people understand self-awareness. And the reality is it's pretty fucking simple. I'd love to say it was more complex, because I spent 25 years struggling with it, right? I would love to say it's super complex. Let me tell you all the secrets, right? I'd love to say that, because then it would make me feel better about how hard it was for me to get through all of the things that I had to understand.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fucking simple.
It is.
It's hard. It doesn't take
Very
away
hard.
the hardness of it, but it's simple.
Yeah.
And it's like
it's like one of those things, like, when you try to learn something, it's like you overthink it. You think it's that complicated, and when you're taught it, you're like, what, that's it? They're like, yeah, it's not it. You overthink things. A lot of the things are simpler than what it seems to be. It's just, these are the things that I'm trying to awaken.
Why do you think people overthink it? I'm curious.
I'm not sure. What I'm thinking is that people think things are a lot more complicated, right, than it seems, because I don't know. It's just like we stop ourselves. Like, we are our own worst enemy, right? So Absolutely. If that's the case, then we like, oh, hey, you can own your own business. Like, if I want to start my own business, but a lot of people are like, but I'm, it's crazy. I don't know what to do. It's just like it's themselves. I don't know. It's just some people aren't like that. There's very little people that are like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then try and fail, and then keep going too at the same time.
Right.
They don't need really somebody to push them. They find things themselves. So, and then some people, and most people, I think, are just built differently, right?
I think it's the concept of judgment.
Yes.
I think the people that are able to do the incredible things, right? Like they have either grown up with a very different cultural understanding of judgment, like one's self-judgment for sure, but also like they may have or may have not been taught judgment early on as being almost like spite in some ways.
Sure.
But like I think people tend to look at themselves and judge themselves because that was a voice that was taught to them. Right. And like you said, hate is taught. It's how people process the vision of others, I think. Because if you are stopping yourself because you state this reason, well, where'd you get that reason from? More than likely it was cultural, it was parental, it was peer based, or like a number of other places where you got that reason from. And
you acquired it,
and somehow you've justified that for as long as you have, when the reality is that culture has not created a positive connotation on failure.
Exactly.
Failure is the most important thing in the world, right? Like
Definitely 100%.
when you touch a hot stove, that's a failure.
A failure.
And guess what?
The lesson.
Luckily, your hand will heal if you don't touch it for long enough. And then when you look at that stove again, you'll be like, I wonder if that's hot this time. And you put your hand next to the stove and you don't touch it this time. And you're like, oh, it's not. Cool. We're good. Right? Like,
I think
that's learning.
I think most people don't realize we're failing all the time.
Absolutely.
You're constantly failing, and that's how you learn, right? I mean, it's so cliche, or you know, people heard it before, but it's like this TikTok thing too. Like, even for me in the beginning, it was judgment.
Yeah.
It was a little like, oh, I want to do this. I want to. What I first did in my TikTok was put out first random videos just to see, because I studied the algorithm, and then I wanted to do military too, so I added some military, and then my military stuff started like getting some, so that's what I'm like, okay, so I guess that's what they want to see. I put it out, but even just starting that, I was like a little, you know, you're a little self-conscious. The judgment comes in, like, what am I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell no friends. I didn't tell, I just told my wife, you know, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and she's very introverted, so she's like, she gets a little anxiety me just saying that. I'm like, you're not gonna be on, I'm not gonna put you on into the internet.
Right.
Okay. All right. You know, and I told her the plan. I said, you know, I'm going to tell stories. You know, I gotta show them, or whoever wants to hear it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I didn't tell any of my friends, but somehow it kind of went viral and exploded to the point where people were like text messaging me. They're like, hey, is this you? You know, what are you doing? You know, I saw you.
Bro, I found you.
So it's pretty fun too at the same time, but it's so like judgment is like, oh, you know, a little almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
But once you get past that, it's so, you know, past that judgment, past that stuff that you're saying, the insecurities and just understanding, like,
it's a powerful position.
And that understanding too is that self-awareness, I guess, is so useful. And I know there's a lot of people trying to break out of it. You know, there's so many people that want to do, they see me, like my friends, they're like, oh, Terry can do it, I can do it, but they won't, you know. And I know like some do want to do it, and I encourage them, like, forget about the noise, man, just put some out. It's going to be awkward in the beginning, but after you do it many times, you just got to keep doing it, right? It's that thing, do it every day or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, consistently. I think about my journey through all this, and like, I'm talking about mental health. And when I grew up, mental health was not a thing. You know that. You were there.
Yeah.
Like, when we grew up, like, if you didn't feel good, if you felt sad, like, nobody was like, oh, you might have depression. Have you ever thought about looking into that? No, they were like, get the fuck over it. Right. Like, that's what I was told in many circumstances, right? Like, you weren't allowed to have feelings because it was an inconvenience for people.
Eat ice cream. You know? Yeah, right. Like, that was like the thing. Eat ice cream. That was the thing.
Right. Like, and if my goal is to change that stigma, then of course I'm going to have to fight people that are going to judge me for what I say. And that's the point, right? Like, in a sense, if you want to change how things are, you have to be ready for people who have not the ability to understand what can come. And so you have to accept that judgment, 1, is going to happen. 2, it's going to suck. And 3, like, you have to create the perspective that recognizes the limitations of how people look at life.
Yeah.
And if you want to change someone's mind, if you want to share things, like, no one is going to understand what you do, right? No one, like, even me, like, I don't understand how you do the things that you do. And I'm a creator, right? Like, because you've created your own emotional processes. You've created your own perspective about what it takes to post, how often you post, why you post, when you post, right? Like, you do you. I don't know that, but I'm probably one of the closest guys to understand what you've gone through. But I could judge you, and you could look at that, and you might take that personally because I'm a fellow creator. But at the same time, like, I hope you don't, because what you do is so fundamentally you that it doesn't matter who else judges you. You're changing lives, and so am I. Like I try and help people understand very simply that even the most prolific and intelligent and profound people that you know are going to disappoint you.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's life. That's
Just
human.
that's life.
It's
Yeah.
human nature, right? Like I'm going to disappoint people at some
Yeah.
point, right? I'm probably going to post something stupid or something, like I'm going to disappoint you, right?
Yeah. Can we
And
make
that's okay.
mistakes? Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Like you and me probably disagree on something somewhere in our lives.
Yeah,
And you know
of
what we're
course.
going to do? We're going to be like, cool. I
Yeah.
still like you. Right.
Yeah.
Because
It's definitely, I think, it's really up to that person receiving that. So let's say people, like, we understand human nature, we make mistakes or we do something stupid or whatever,
yeah,
or we offend somebody, but it's really up to, I think, it's very individual. I think if we have accountability of ourselves,
yes,
the world would be a lot better, instead of either blaming somebody or hating somebody. It's like, okay, maybe he's just going, if somebody experienced like, somebody's had a really bad day and they're mad, they can't control their emotions,
right,
and they put that anger on somebody else, right? Like, that person can either have many options, can either fight that person or be mad too and reflect the same energy back, or try to
float.
understand, he must
Yeah,
be going something, it's not me, he's not
yep,
mad at me, he's mad though. And this can solve a lot more issues. Instead of, I normally, back then I used to be more like, who are you yelling at, and
yeah,
and reflect this, bounce the energy back.
right,
Now I'm trying to be like, whoa, why is this
yeah,
happening? And that judgment, like before, it was like, it's the same thing what you said, bring it back to judgment. It's like, and it's, if I back down, will I be looked at as like a pussy?
right,
No, it doesn't even matter anymore.
yeah,
Who cares about what people do the right thing?
yeah,
Um, one of the things though, when I first did a trip, my first tribute ever was to my boy. He's a Marine, Tracy Mabine,
yeah,
and I actually was hesitant. I always wanted to do tribute, like but I was very hesitant to talk about other people's stories, especially like Tracy's. I don't want people to think that I'm capitalizing
right.
on this. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
I do.
I don't want, like, and so that was like the struggle that I went through right before. I'm like, I made it and I loved it. I cried, like, I rolled up, I was
Yeah,
like, people, and I didn't share it for a little bit. I had it, but I didn't share it because I, I thought, for one thing that really stopped me was, I didn't want his family, for some reason, if they even saw it, to be pissed for some reason.
yeah,
That's what went through my head.
yeah, absolutely.
And I did it. I convinced myself. I was like, I want people to know this person,
Yeah,
to know that this person exists. Because before I put that video, it has 4 million views now.
yeah, it's crazy.
So
It's a beautiful video.
yeah, so like 4 million people got to see who he was,
Yeah,
and I just had to convince myself. I didn't know that was gonna blow. I didn't know.
right.
I
You
just
never
wanted
know.
to. I just wanted like whoever sees this to, hey, this person existed.
Yeah,
He was my best friend. He was like one of the best buds, in the Marine Corps. And yeah, and it worked out. His family actually is somehow, the algorithm sent it to the family, contacted, and they appreciated it. They said that they all gathered in the living room, something like that, and they watched it and they cried. And because I had videos of him that they didn't never saw.
right.
And I was like, oh man, I that gave me really good reassurance that I got to continue this. I got to continue. I always wanted to tell. So before I even did that tribute, I got to like maybe like 70,000 followers. I was growing
Yeah,
with what I had was like the whole, like, my video. I document a lot of videos. I vlogged
yeah,
before vlogging was a thing,
right.
when I was in Iraq. So I had a lot of footage, a lot of like content and stories. So I just told, like, even it was bored, like it wasn't like action. I didn't get to. I wish I had like a GoPro that was attached that I can like show firefights and stuff like that. But during those times, you know, the last thing on my mind was to pull out a camera.
Right, priorities, right?
Yeah. So I had a lot of footage of Iraq though, like, you know, patrolling, just us, just randomly patrolling, and like, and then I told stories of what went through my head and who these people were, like the snipers. This is one video I did with the snipers. I loved them. I look at them as like the varsity, like, whoa, the snipers, you know. So right. I told that story and I loved it. People loved it too. I also wanted to use that moment, that the beginning of my TikTok, when I started TikTok, the beginning, to introduce myself in a way to validate myself to people, that I am a Marine, I am military, because when I started to do those tributes of other soldiers and military personnel, service members, comments were rough. So, you know, in the beginning, you know, you had a lot of trolls and stuff like that. But one person, what got me was somebody was on my ass about stolen valor. He was like, "Who is this guy?" I remember writing, "Who is this guy?" You know, probably what I was thinking too. Like, are you trying to get views, profiting off people's stories? Man, it's not what I'm trying to do. You know, really, that's the last thing I'm trying to do. I don't even try to take any money for this. You know, I'm trying to just be very clean. Like, I just want to tell the stories. That's it. Show these people exist. So this guy, I remember seeing him constantly on my ass, and like, and then it's just angrier and angrier. It's like, stolen valor. I'm like, what? But luckily, I had followers from the beginning who backed me up too, and saw what I was actually doing. And he's like, why don't you go take a look at his profile? Why don't you go, you know, look at it? He's a combat veteran. And then he stopped. And I didn't have to say a word. So that's why, you know, another thing I learned is, like, I don't argue with these people. These people are not mad at me. They don't know me. It's one of those things, again, they're just upset. They just
don't know.
They're upset. Maybe something's going on with them to be that angry at somebody. But now my comments are clean. Like, for some reason, it's very great. My comment section, I rarely have anything negative, like, especially towards me, but, you know, it's mostly positive comments, which I love. That I love it too. And it shows a lot of pride. One thing, we talked about perspective before, you know, I put the age on there too, you know, especially, you know, I always, you know, because especially for the ones that pass away, I get a lot of like 19-year-olds commenting, which you know, they show, like, they say, like, you know, wow, I'm 19. It shows a different perspective. And I'm glad. I didn't know what perspective was when I was 19. I was an idiot, you know. I was like, I'll join the Marines, you know.
Likewise,
to see the younger generation, like the 19-year-olds now, to see something like this, and to see what other 19-year-olds did and have that perspective, it's great. It's very, like, you know, promising. And it's a good so there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, man.
This madness that we're all in, you know. So there's a lot of benefits. Those comment sections are great. A lot of pride. You have to see it as like a market too, right? You have to, you know, and the market needs to speak to you. You need to listen to them because they speak to you.
Right.
If you just, you know, that's what I do. I'm the more they love it, I'm like, okay, the more I'll give it, you know, of this. And I really appreciate, you know, the people, like, you know, it's just, they're not there for me. They're there for this, like, the people who I'm just telling the story. I didn't make the story anything better. The story was great on its own. I'm just serving it, you know, on a maybe nicer plate. That's it.
It's a pretty nice damn plate.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
But my thing is too, when I do read these stories, I have, like, what I feel when I read the story, I try to mimic that same feeling. I try to, like, transfer that to whoever's viewing it.
It shows.
Like, you know, I try to do that, whether it's with me, like the music and everything. Like, this is what I feel.
Yeah.
Sad.
Right.
And or prideful too, like, or very some stories are very good.
Yeah.
You know, there's uplifting ones too. I try to mix it in because there's a lot of sad ones because a lot of sad stuff happened. But there were a lot of very brave moments too, where even they survived. Like a lot of, a lot of service members survive very heroic moments. And I love those too, because then I get to use like very energetic and very how I feel. Like, man, this is why I joined. Like, these are who the people we know, and then there's happy times. There's very great moments in our country. And this people are awesome. People are awesome.
Yeah.
It's the people. It's
great. I just love it. Like there's so many things that you're saying that just so relatable. Like I'm the same, right? Like I'm a creator just in a different niche, and I'm doing my thing. And I had a comment a while back. I think it was on Instagram, not TikTok, but same thing, right? Like,
yeah,
this guy, I was talking about my book, and he's like, "Oh, cool, you're profiting off your father's suicide." I'm like, bro, you don't even know.
Yeah.
Like how I can tell sometimes when I know I have a healthy perspective on judgment is that when that happened, nothing fazed me. When I looked at that comment, I was like, he doesn't get it. That was the first thing I said. Like, my wife was sitting right there, and I'm like, he doesn't get it. And I showed her, and she was mad. Like, she was far more angry than I ever get at these comments. And at this point, it wasn't long ago. It was probably 2 or 3 months ago. And, I had built up this perspective over creating. Like, I'm an introvert, right? I'm very introverted. And so, like, doing what I do, like, I speak to people. And so, like, being an introvert and speaking to people on an extroverted platform, it's very different for me when I first started. So, like, I had to build up a lot of courage to do what I do now. And I feel remarkably comfortable in what I do.
Good.
But it took some time. It took some time to figure out, like, should I say something like that? Because I'm pushing into stigmas. And when I first started is when I really got the negative comments. I don't get many now. I get a lot. It's kind of like you. Like, I have a very clean comment section. People appreciate my perspective. When they question, it's usually like genuine. Like, I want to know your thoughts on this. It's not that like political banter where it's just butting heads at each other.
Yeah.
It's genuine understanding. Like, I want to know how to get better. I want to know how to work through these things. And I think that's a credit to our, just our dedication to who we are, right?
Yeah.
Like, we want to understand people, but at the same time, like, we're not going to be assholes about it. Like, we set the boundaries that we need to set to be creators and respect what we are willing to give and what we're not willing to give. Yeah. And we're both just trying to tell stories, right?
Yeah.
Yours are stories of incredible human beings doing incredible things. Some we've lost and some we haven't. I'm trying to tell the stories of the people that are here and talk about my story and talk about the stories that show people a way forward. And whether we profit off that is not the point, right? Like, we both have to live. So at some point, like, I have to profit so that I can take care of my family
and continue this
and continue what I'm trying to, like, the more money I make, the more I can put my message out, right? Like,
exactly.
That's how I look at it. It's like, yes, I want to make more money because then I can make more of an impact in more people's lives and change the fucking stigma that nearly killed me.
Yeah.
And that's simple, right? Like, if you make money off of this, great, because you're going to have better cameras, better stories, better whatever you need
support
to make the stories. So I have always been for, like, creators that are, like, in that mindset of, like, I don't want to profit off this because of judgment. And I'm like, profit so that you can do better and prove it to people. Like, I love proving people wrong, right? Like, there was a long time ago, I can't remember when it was said, but it was something that stuck with me. And someone was like, "You should go kill yourself." I think it was like back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And that was like after my dad died. And I was like,
Jeez.
you know, it's a brutal thing to say to a kid. And, you know, I was bullied in high school. So like I was too skinny and people were like, kids are assholes.
Yeah.
And I love spiting people. And I remember holding on to that for a while. And it was like, it was the thing for a while. Like it didn't last because I would move on and find different things. But that was one of the things that held me up. Was it healthy? No, but it worked. Right. Like I'm here. And I want content creators, like when people judge them, be like, yeah, you're going to profit off these people's deaths. Like, yeah, I am, so that I can show people who these people really were, so that I can take those profits and put them back into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And share and do better. And what are you doing? Right? Like push the question back on them. Not to judge them, but remind you of your
them.
place. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I was just thinking about the Tracy Mabian one.
That's a good video.
Yeah, so what happened with that, I mean, I was just watching it earlier today too for some reason. I don't know why I stumbled on. It said you know, he was crying. Like, so after, what happened was that we were on a night mission. We're coming back home, back to base. We're in a convoy. I think I had to pick up a Humvee. Like, I was in this 7-ton. It's one of these big trucks, right? I wasn't the driver. I was a vehicle commander. So it's just me and my driver. And we're making a U-turn on this very narrow road. It's just been cleared by EOD. Like, you know, they deemed it safe.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're just making a U-turn anyway. So there's two Humvees in front of us. They made it. It's such a small road that you had to take turns to make the U-turn. And one Humvee went, which was Tracy's Humvee, and he passed me. He was the lead Humvee, and then another Humvee passed, and then our 7-ton truck, was also towing a broken Humvee, was making a U-turn. So we took a little while. You know, I'm like riding hams at night. I'm like, we're good. All right. While there was a convoy behind us, like another couple of more Humvees, a few more Humvees behind us, waiting for us to turn.
Right.
While they're waiting, we're passing by one of the Humvees that was next in line to turn. I believe our 7-ton, why the two Humvees passed that little road, that little patch that everyone drove on. They passed, but when we rode on it, we detonated a pressure plate because I think we were too heavy, the 7-ton, and that caused the daisy chain to go off. And all I remember was just like, you know, it was my first time being IED, so it was just boom, just like this pop noise, right? Dirt, like everything went dark, like everything. And I remember my driver just screaming like fuck, because he kind of understood what happened. And I, you know, SOP, standard operating procedure, is to go 500 yards away from the kill zone. And, you know, he just I wouldn't say freaking out, but he was yelling. And I said, drive, you know, and yelling at him. And he floors it. I just remember flooring it, and it wasn't going. The engine's revving, but we weren't going anywhere. It's because the blast knocked the transmission into neutral. So we're just in neutral, and I saw it, and so I pressed the it's just a button on the 7-ton to shift. So I pressed it, and we locked back into drive, and we went out. I said, go, you know, go right here. It's about 500 yards, 500 meters, whatever. And we got out, and it's all fucked up. What happened was, though, the Humvee that was next to us, the Humvee it's not built like the way 7-ton is. 7-ton is higher off the ground, has metal plates underneath. The Humvee is actually bare underneath. It's just like a regular car, if anything.
Right.
And that killed another Marine. You know, it hurt him bad. And, you know, one of the worst things I heard was like, you know, hearing corpsman up. You know, in for army. So it is medic, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the worst thing to hear over the hooks. And I was just like, fuck, man, fuck. 'Cause I knew that it was a Humvee right next to us.
Yeah.
That just clicked in my head. I'm like, fuck. I didn't know how many.
Right.
But that was a full Humvee. I think it was either, yeah, it was four, one and a turret gunner. They all got, the gunner got peppered all over his legs, you know, shrapnel. Everyone got shrapnel, but the guy, the Marine, Garcia S. Chill, Lance Corporal Garcia S. Chill, he was sitting in the back behind the driver's seat, I believe. And that whole back just got ripped apart. So we called in the helo, you know, we called in medevac, everything, and then we raced, we put him on the helo, and we raced back to, because we're going back to base, and base wasn't that far. They're still stable, you know. So we rushed back to base. We're flooring it because they, you know, they need to go to the hospital.
Right.
We're clearing the roads, you know, lights on, everything. And we popped the flare to signal the gate. We're not, you know, we're coming in hot, you know. Yeah, I just remember, and my 7-ton, we had to pack, everybody was full, so my 7-ton is like a little bench.
Yep.
In the cab, right? It's the driver, me, and then like I believe like 2 more Marines that from the wounded, 3 of them, just like we're all just jam packed and quiet. We're just quiet.
Yeah.
Going, you know, we're just quiet because what we just, you know.
It's the longest.
And I remember, yeah, and I remember looking at one of the Marines' faces. He was just like,
yeah,
he wasn't blinking. I know he just saw something crazy. So
I know.
I saw in his face what I know it, you know. Man, I just looking back at that. And then we went back, you know, we put him in the hospital, and then we all went back to the motor pool and went to the briefing room. And in the debrief, our sergeants, you know, he was saying, you know, because he didn't make it. So it's just fucking tough. And then everybody left. It was me and Tracy Mabine, the one who I did the video about. You know, I just remember he's a tough dude, you know. And but this was my first time seeing him so in that position, and I saw him cry for the first time too. And I was, you know, in the video it says that, you know, he was crying and you know, he thought that it was me, because what happened was that after he passed, he set up his Humvee with security for us to
do you turn around.
Yeah. So what he told me, my truck, he was watching us. He's a turret gunner too, so he was watching us. He had full view of us, and he just saw my 7-ton disappear in the blast.
Yeah.
He was crying. What he said, it was like, this is not what I remember exactly what he said. This is not what I wanted to see. It's not what I did not want to see this shit. You know, I already saw death because I was out with the line company with the infantry. So I saw a lot and I did a lot. He was with this convoy security group. So he didn't get to see as much as what I saw out there with the infantry. And this was the first time seeing death. This was like near the end of the deployment, or near almost like a month or 2 left. And I realized I'm numb. I knew I was sad, but I was numb. Like I understood what's happening.
Yeah.
I was even more sad that he was sad. Yeah. That he was my, one of my good friends, one of my best friends, and see him hurt. And that made me like, man. I'm like, damn. But and then while he was crying, he said like, what made me even more sad is like, he thought it was me that died. And I was like, what a thing to say, that's a very, like, because he was that like worried, right? Because we're thinking,
boys.
to anybody listening, it's just friends. think about your really close friend going to, you know, you're going through this kind of shitty situation. It's the same thing. It's just like seeing somebody, one of your close friends blow up.
Yeah, literally blow up. Yeah.
Yeah. And that perspective, I just understood it recently. Like, you know, like later on, I didn't understand it then. I was sad though, that, and then I appreciated it of who he was, that said, you know, because that kind of even made me feel, wow, what a good friend that his concerns was about, you know, he thought of that, because it did explode on, I was the, my truck was the main bomb, boom, whatever. So, but so, you know, we made it. We finished our deployment. We got out. I got out, you know, after, and he actually went on. He's a very good basketball player. He went on to play for the base team. So I think his final year, he told me, was, I was like, how's everything going? He was like, man, he's just playing ball for the Marine Corps, basically. And he got to go to Hawaii, he told me, like, awesome. And all that stuff. So I was like, it's great. What a great way to end your Marine Corps career, because he was going to get out after his 4. He was such a great Marine too. He was a very good Marine. Everyone loved him. He never talked back, always did what he had, you know, very reliable, and a fighter. So, you know, he got to finish off his career playing basketball, which he loved. You know, he was very good at it. And then I think it was like maybe a year out after he got out, he got in the car accident. Like, he wasn't one driving. They went to like the Rocky Mountains, and on the way back home, the driver fell asleep and head-on collision with a tractor, with another truck, I believe. And then, you know, they said that, you know, they died instantly, the two front, and I believe the passenger in the back was like critical condition or something like that. But yeah, so, you know, they said that maybe Tracy, you know, he did die, he didn't suffer, which is a good thing. So you know, he was asleep, I'm guessing, you know, he was asleep in the front, and then which the driver fell asleep too. So I have a lot more Marines die after combat, and it's a lot to do with suicide too, not just like free. I mean, my sergeant, after I came back from Japan, my sergeant that was with me, and I knew, such a cool dude. We after on leave, he went to the lake, and he went jet skiing. Must have hit a wave, knocked him out his chest, and they found him drowned. You know, he already had I believe 2 deployments where, you know, he had a combat deployment to Iraq. You know, survived that. We survived these crazy moments in the military. We get out, and that madness kind of follows us.
Yeah,
it catches up, right? So I always felt like, after getting out, first of all, I felt like I was gonna die. I was, before going to Iraq, I made peace with myself. I might die. It's a huge chance out, you know. And again, the Marine Corps they don't sugarcoat that. Right. They tell you before, like, hey, not everybody's gonna come. I mean, it's the truth. There's no way to. You're going to war. Yeah. there's no way to make this nice.
Bullets don't give a fuck.
Yeah. And so it took me a while, like not a while, but to convince myself, like, all right, I'm gonna have to do what I'm gonna do. You know, we're gonna go. Because I knew, which one thing I appreciated myself for is that I knew I cannot go there and perform scared.
Right.
And the only thing that I knew was scaring me is death. So I had to be like, trick myself or convince myself that, okay, it's okay to die. And I loved what the Marine Corps says, is that Marines go to, when you die, Marines don't die, we go to heaven. We go guard the gates of heaven. And really, you know, you have to, before going into, like, if you're a football player, or any sports, you have to psych yourself out to get to that position. That's what I did, and that stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And especially after getting out, I continued to think that I was gonna die. So my relationship with death wasn't healthy, but it was at least a relationship that many people don't even have. And that's what I worked on. Death is a part of life.
Yeah.
I think we're avoiding that. A lot of people are avoiding death, like as if they can avoid it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can eat. I mean, eating healthy and all that stuff is great, good. But there's a lot of people that do it because they're fucking scared.
Yeah.
But rightfully so.
Absolutely.
Right. 100%. I understand why, but also it can cause you to do crazy things, you know, and you live in fear, you know, and you know, and then if you live in fear, then you can't live life. So that's why I understood like early. I mean, a few years after I got out, when I was in California and going to college, I kind of try to understand more about life and death, and that, you know, those things helped me build like to get to a more clearer mind. But during that time, don't get me wrong, I was struggling and suffering with I I never knew I had PTSD. I thought everything was fine.
Yeah.
You know, everybody around me, when after I came back from Iraq, especially my sister, my grandma, she would tell me, tell me to go to church because they saw maybe something different in me.
Yeah.
I know my sister told me, she said, you know, you should go to church specifically because she said, you know, you don't seem the same. And what a thing to say, because my sister, you know, I love her, you know, she's such an angel. So for her to say that, it's like, you know, I just kind of, I'm like, nah, you know, and then other people said the same thing. So, but to me, you know, self-awareness.
Yeah.
You don't know. If you don't have self-awareness, you don't know
Right.
how other people are perspective. Like I didn't even know perspectives and stuff like that. Like I said, right? Wasn't even considering that.
I think it's so hard, you know, and I look back at my first deployment, because it's, you know, your first deployment's really the one where you're like, you come home and you don't really know how to come home. And when you go through that experience, especially this stuff that we've seen, you come home not wanting to be home. And so when people tell you like you're different, you don't care, because you know, for me, like and you know, you tell me if you felt the same way, but like for me, like when I came home, I just really didn't care if I died. I didn't care if
Same
people
here.
if people had any thoughts about me. I didn't give a fuck, right? Like I was in a place where I was, in a sense, I was selfish, because, well, I wasn't out of the military, but National Guard's different, right? Like you're out in the world, right? Like when I went to drill, I was at drill, right? Like I was selfless. But when I was at home, like I just didn't care what people thought about me. So I made decisions that hurt people, you know, and just didn't care what the consequences of them were, because one, I had just saw like so many things that were just terrifying. And what's the point in trying if that's what I have to live with for the rest of my life? And and when I look back on this, my second deployment, which was 2019, my first one was 2012. 2019, I was very well prepared for that. You know, nothing happened in front of me that, you know, that really put me in a place where I was like struggling. So it's quite a simple deployment, straightforward. I was in danger. There was a couple times where like in a split second, I would have shot a dude in the face that was, you know, from me to the computer screen away. Like that's how there was in situations where I was so intense looking at this man thinking he was going to shoot me. Like I was thinking through, you know, I was thinking through situations where I was going to like, I'm going to grab his gun first, right? Like I'm thinking about how can I protect the people around me while killing him and not dying, because at the time when I deployed in 2019, I just married my wife, and I'm like, I got a lot to live for, you know, but at the same time, I'm like, it's the same thing. Like, I can't go there scared, right? Because one, I'm a leader, and two, like, if I think about her and only her and my son, who am I going to fail? Right. Who
Mm-hmm.
am I going to fail in front of me? Right. Like I don't want to allow my sense of selfishness to come and, put me in a place where I'm going to regret living, kind of thing. And that's such a hard thing for a 31-year-old to do, let alone an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And to look at that situation and recognize, like, when those situations happen, it was all training, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
all that overthinking that I did, to think about, like, how am I going to react? Like, how am I going to justify doing, what the right thing is like putting myself in the line of fire if I have to, because I know that's right. If I see it, like, all of that was useless, because I
Yeah.
had trained so well that when it came down to it, I was ready to grab this dude's AK and put around in his skull,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that other people were not hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I was willing to take that rifle and put it in my chest if I had to,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that other people, it was just a natural response for me. And I'm
Yeah.
thankful that never happened. I'm thankful
Yeah.
that, like, this guy recognized, like, because I'm a pretty towering figure when I'm in uniform, and in kit, I'm 6'4", right? You put a helmet on me and boots on me, I'm like 6'6",
Yeah.
and I'm a big dude. And
A huge
this,
target.
yeah, I mean, this Afghan is just sitting in front of me, like, it was one of those moments where I'm like, what's going on, man? And this dude is not thinking clearly, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's not in a good place. And he just didn't look at me. He's looking at everybody else but me, the guy that's literally right in front of him, talking to him. And it's just like all of the signals that you get in a situation where they're like, this guy wants to fight. I got
Yeah.
those. And that, in that situation, like, you like, thinking through that situation, like, I look back on it and I'm like, I did the right thing, luckily,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I stood in front of him and I made sure he knew that, like, if he's going to try something, he's going to die. You may take someone with you, but you're going to die.
Yeah.
And I everything about my body language was informing him of that,
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. Your
And
plans aren't going to work out. Yeah.
and to think about that, the responsibility of, like, that's just an experience that I had overseas in one deployment, right? But the responsibility that puts on a person, that
Mm-hmm.
I had, at that point, I had 12 years in the infantry to know how to handle that situation, right? And numerous years of those were firearms instructor and concealed carry instructor. So I had, like, all of this background.
You're ready.
But think about an 18-year-old put in a situation like that.
Yeah. And they go through that a lot. I mean, a lot of, and
Every day.
they're very mature. That's what I saw when I was with the infantry too. And I looked at them and, they're either younger than me or about the same age. I was like 22, 21 and 19-year-olds. And they're very, I forgot that we were kids. We were so young. I look back, I'm like, damn, we're just kids with guns.
Yeah.
And grenades and all that cool stuff. But with the maturity and the responsibility that you grew up fast, grow up really quick, and I think that's like, because you don't have to think about death if you're not in that situation. If you're not in the military, you don't necessarily have to think about death. That's something you think about later on in your life, maybe in your midlife, at least, like after 30s, right? You think about, like, man, dying, right? But it came so early on for us. I think it brings us to another maturity level of understanding life better.
Absolutely.
So yeah, man. I forgot what I was gonna say.
It's a hell of a thing. That's what I'll say. Well,
it's crazy.
Terry.
Yeah.
I want to, we can close this up. We can wrap this up. We've talked a lot about a lot of awesome stuff, and this has been incredible. And I don't want to take up all your evening. So I'm going to ask you one final question, and we can always come back and talk about all this stuff again. I'd love to have you on, especially as you grow and do the many good things that you're going to do. But here's my question. If there was a message that you could leave the world, what would it be?
Just try to understand. Just try to understand. Try, use that brain. We're so quick to just assume or judge, like, without trying to use our brains. We forget that our brains are muscle. It's not like a, it's just this mushy thing. It's actual muscle that if you keep using it, it gets tired too. Like, just like if it has many curls or whatever, it gets strenuous. Same thing. If you keep thinking, that's why, a lot of, CEOs and stuff, they try not to make decisions, right? Because that could wear them out, because they have to make bigger decisions later throughout the day. So that's why a lot of people wear the same clothes. I wear the same clothes. That's one thing I have to let's think about.
Yep.
That my brain. So one thing is to try to understand other people before, like, even though they're wrong. Why, just trying to. I think that from there will make yourself feel better, or you'll understand yourself too. It's just it'll definitely. I think it'll make the world a better place. Trying to understand each other.
Absolutely.
Try to understand. It takes a lot though. It takes a lot of patience.
Sure does.
And a lot of, one thing I did want to ask you though.
Yeah, go for it.
That's what I was gonna ask. That's what I was gonna say before I forgot. Well, for me, with what's happening in Afghanistan, it hit me hard.
Yeah.
The way everything just played out. The way, man, what hit me really hard though was after the 13 service members died. It broke me. Like, I just didn't even want to, like, post. I didn't want to do anything. Like, I just fell into depression. I kind of, like, what, like, I know, especially because you deployed to Afghanistan. What's your perspective on what's going through your mind?
Well, I was in the thick of it in sniper school when that happened. So I was in a place where, in many senses of the word, you had to mask those emotions. I made a video about it, and nobody around me really saw that I was allowing myself to feel, because, like, I was crying, like when I finished that video, I kind of broke down a little bit, and I kind of, like, just hid, not out of shame. It's just like, I don't want to talk about this stuff right now.
I get it.
And then I got COVID. So just to bring everybody else up to speed, Terry already knows this, but I got COVID halfway through sniper school. And then I got diagnosed right after phase 1. So I had to end sniper school halfway through, and then I got quarantined for 10 days. Now, I'm going to reveal some personal things that I've been going through. I haven't really talked about yet, but in those 10 days, I was dealing with that whole Afghanistan situation, kind of thinking through all of that stuff. And then I lost my grandpa. So I was told literally the day that I came back from the hospital to start quarantine that my grandpa was declining. And 6 days later, he ended up passing. And then 4 days after that, I was able to go home. So it was a really tough situation all around. And I, like, just like you, I was in depression, right? Like, I was in a very short-term depression in Arkansas, where I was like, I was alone. I was getting fed like shit because nobody prepares for that. Like, oh, somebody has COVID, like, you have to quarantine them now, and, like, nobody knows how to feed a soldier like that. And I didn't know you could get DoorDash, so that was kind of a pain in the ass until like the second to last day I got DoorDash. Got like 50 wings for Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm like, I'm abusing this now. So I'm sitting in my room, and I'm looking at all of this. I'm looking at this whole situation, and so many people are trying to make it political. So many people are trying to look at, like, this person failed, this person failed, this person failed. We shouldn't have been there in the first place. We shouldn't have done this. And I'm where I am. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 years of my life spent in this country. And I met a lot of people that looked at me and said, I'm happy you guys are here. A lot of Afghans, right? Not all of them. And I would suspect that not all of them wanted us there, right? Obviously.
Of course.
But there were people there that said, because of you, my family has freedoms that they wouldn't have had with the Taliban. And
Of course.
I see that. Like, I have a perspective of that. And I don't look at my time in Afghanistan as being a waste. I refuse to, right? Like, nothing I have ever done has been a waste, right? And keep in mind, this comes from a person that has put a gun to my head, right? I have put a gun to my head, and I do not look at that as a waste. Right? So my perspective is very much not about creating problems. It's about finding solutions. It's about looking at what I have done and what the nation has done, right? Like, certainly we did wrong things, right? And I don't know the full scope of everything that we did wrong in Iraq and Afghanistan. But what I know for a fact is that there were people that I met in Afghanistan that said, this was worth it.
Yeah.
And I look at that. I'm not going to look at Biden or Trump or Obama or Bush and all the bullshit that people want to put out in the media. I'm not going to look at that shit. That if you want to look at your diet, look at how you consume social media. Because if your consumption makes you stress, it's no different than eating sugar all day, every day.
All right.
You're creating an environment within your body that is negative, within your mind that's negative.
Yeah.
I just don't consume that stuff. And so I don't get locked into this battle of trying to justify what I did overseas. Right? It's not my job to justify what I did overseas.
Yeah.
Right? It's a politician's, and if they got it wrong, it happens. But I know what I saw, and I know the people that I met that looked at me and said, thank you.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think I've had more genuine thank yous from Afghans than I have from some Americans.
Yeah.
Because they don't realize what it means to defend people that are literally being killed and assassinated and murdered at night.
Yeah.
Like, I was in Kabul, and every single night it was like, yep, this Afghan police commander got assassinated last night. Checkpoint 6 got, bombed last night. Like, you don't know. And when people look at it and say, like, you guys, it was all worth nothing. Like, bullshit. We gave Afghans 20 years of relative peace.
Yeah.
Sure, we were fighting in their country against people that would, if you didn't do any research on the Taliban, you wouldn't understand that, just a couple years prior, they were putting people in Connex boxes and locking them in there and letting them roast to death. Right. But I did my research. I looked at what the Taliban was from people from Afghans who wrote books about them, right? From many different perspectives. And I knew what I was getting myself into, right? And I knew that when I got there, I was going to talk to people and realize and recognize what was happening. And were we always fighting perfectly? No, it's a fucking war.
Yeah.
Right. There's issues there. There's always going to be issues there, and it's not always going to look clean. It's not always going to look comfortable. There was collateral damage, and we hurt people, and that's an unfortunate circumstance of war, and people paid with their lives, and yet those people didn't have to die in a Connex box because the Taliban said you can't do what you want to do. Like, it's nothing about it is good. Nothing about it is comfortable. But I know that, like, we gave millions of Afghans like a sense of freedom that they never had.
For sure.
Prior to that. And I think they'll remember that.
It shows how many, just how many people were trying to flee. It shows that, like, whoa, you guys are leaving? You guys were the one of the support, like a leg on the table. That's how I look at it. We were as if like a table that fell. Like, now we set ourselves as one of the legs, and now we're taking that leg out again. And people saw that, and they're like, we man, we need you here. And yeah, it's the military. You know, I love our military. I mean, it's the American. The military is made up of Americans,
Mhm.
of the people, of our friends, our family, our neighbors, our, you know, our moms and dads, our cousins and sisters and brothers. We forget that, I think, you know, and we turn our back, either our back, or we like shame them. I don't know, or you know, because not everybody will have the same view
It's
as us. Yeah,
it's a narrative.
yeah, it is
It's
definitely
a
the narrative.
narrative. When a
Right.
narrative comes out in the spotlight,
Mm-hmm.
people don't like, your advice is so relative, I'm sorry, relevant in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Try to understand.
Yeah,
It's what people don't do,
yeah. It's just
right?
quick. We're just quick, emotional.
People
We're
didn't
emotional people.
people didn't try to understand what happened in Afghanistan in
Yeah.
August. They didn't. They tried to blame. And
Oh
unfortunately,
yeah.
that's just such a cultural thing for us now. It's become, I think it's become far worse with social media, and that's kind of one of the things that I try and speak out against, and just try and help people understand that you don't understand, right? Like the self-awareness thing that you talked about. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
one of the most important fundamental laws of self-awareness is you don't know what you don't know,
I say that all the time. What
right?
you don't know, and that's up. You know,
And you
I
can't
say that all the
know
time. Right?
everything that you don't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I say that
so,
all the time. It's crazy.
yeah, I mean, when I look at things like Afghanistan, like it was bigger than anyone. It's bigger than everyone. But I know the influence of many things. And like when you show people a sense of and a taste of freedom, it has long lasting effects.
Yeah.
And in a sense, like you can look at how the Taliban functions now compared to how it functions, 25 years ago. They actually came to the table, right? Like now they're actually, sure, they're still fucking assholes, right? Like
Yeah.
that probably hasn't changed that much, but they came to peace talks,
Yeah.
which is different.
Yeah. So what I was, I was talking to my psychiatrist about this actually. Um, well, first thing too, we, you know, what my first psychiatrist I ever spoke to when I was in the Marine Corps, because I was sent there, um, she was telling me, you know, Marines, and I think it goes for a lot of pretty much every military personnel, service member. Uh, we have a hero uh, complex, I guess. I don't want to say complex. I don't. She didn't say it like that, but she said, you know, we find we have like this position that we need to be very heroic, or not to be heroic, but we have that is in our DNA or something. Like we
Yeah,
just tend to,
it's your
we
culture.
yeah, it's like it's a habit
Yeah,
almost,
yeah,
right? Not
absolutely.
a bad habit, but it's just something we tend to go lean towards, is to either sacrifice. We're willing to sacrifice.
Yep.
But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because you said that about that before. But yeah, so yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say, but but my psychiatrist, yeah. So I was talking with my psychiatrist about Afghanistan. The Taliban was never. It's not like they were culturally there, right?
Yeah.
They're the Mujahideen, and you know, the Taliban. They were always culturally there. They never went out to, like, you know, Al Qaeda is different too. I mean, Al
Right.
Qaeda actually, they go out and try to terrorize, like, you know, 9/11 and all that stuff, right? They actually deliberately try to change. From what my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the Taliban itself was always just a cultural, like, let's say a gang or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
or
In,
that
in
was
the
always embedded there.
right in the 90s, so like right after, I should start kind of earlier, in the 80s when
Mm-hmm.
Russia invaded and dominated, right, like the Afghan space.
Mm-hmm.
In the aftermath of the void that was created after the Russians left, it became uh a warlordism is what they kind of
Yeah.
refer to it. So what you find is like the Northern Alliance was created, where they had their own kind of sect. What you saw was the Taliban. Everyone kind of claimed their own areas. It became very tribal. But then all of a sudden, I think it was 94, 95. The Taliban just kind of rose out of the ashes of this, of, like Kandahar and Helmand, and
Yeah.
just swept through the country. The Northern Alliance held its ground.
Mhm.
And that's, the Taliban just kind of overtook, and it's all like, the Taliban has always kind of been a thing in Kandahar and Helmand, right? That's why they've always kind of wanted to create Pashtunistan.
Mhm.
Is kind of what has been, from my research, is what has been kind of a historical, kind of a country itself, right? Because the Pashto language down in Helmand and Kandahar kind of connected people. That's why Kandahar and Helmand were some of the fiercest fighting was
Mhm.
there, is because that's
Mhm.
such an intricacy of the society, was the Taliban way of life. And the rest of the country didn't always feel that way. And what you found is like a lot of the fighting kind of persisted along the border states, where they would, the Taliban would settle into um, Peshawar and like
Mhm.
Pakistan, because they would enter and attack the United States from Pakistan, because we couldn't
Yeah.
technically attack them in Pakistan.
Exactly.
So it's kind of it's cultural in some parts of the country. It's not culture in all parts of the country,
Mm.
right? Kabul is very open, right?
Okay.
The eastern border, where I was my first deployment in Kunar, I just don't think they care, right? Like, they just want to be left alone, right? Like Korangal, because I was pretty close to Korangal, the Pesh Valley, the Kunar River Valley, like getting up into there, like Nangarhar and Kunar, um, Lagman, all of those provinces, like, people just want to be left alone.
Mhm.
Like, and they're dirt poor, so like,
Yeah.
if you pay them $5, they'll walk up on a mountain and shoot you with an AK, right? And then
Mm.
they'll put it down. They'll go get their $5, or the Taliban will just, grab a family member, say, "Go shoot the Americans, or we'll kill your family member."
Mm.
And that, like,
Yeah.
what do you do, right? Like,
Yeah.
clearly, you're gonna fucking go shoot us.
Yeah.
And so like, there's so much cultural differences within Afghanistan that I think we were trying to do things that we weren't really, the country wasn't prepared for. That's just an opinion, and there's not a ton of research behind it. It's just an opinion.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, the Taliban itself has changed. I mean, that's the biggest point that we can make here, is that from 1993, 94, 95, when they rose, they have very much changed as an organization, and
Yeah.
their level of violence is very different, right? They're not ISIS. I don't think
Exactly.
they used to be like ISIS in a sense when they created,
Yeah.
you
That's what
know
I was
that
trying to get at. Where Taliban is not like ISIS or Al
yeah,
Qaeda. They they're just within Afghanistan. Like, it's their home, and they just have this way of culture.
right.
Uh,
They don't
yeah.
want to be a terrorist organization. They just want to control their
Exactly.
territory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Al Qaeda, when I was in Iraq too, like the reason they uh Al Qaeda in Iraq, they were the ones that we were fighting in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is that before that, the people of Iraq was siding with Al Qaeda, right? They were teamed up with Al Qaeda until Al Qaeda themselves turned their back. Pretty much, they're very extreme. They're extremists, right? So they would cut off the lips of, uh, Iraqis or other Muslims
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes, because they believe they're extremists. Like, you're not supposed to smoke cigarettes. So that's what the people were telling us, and they kind of knew, like, oh man, these guys are the bad guys. And and that's how
Right.
that's what a lot of people told us, like,
Yeah.
civilians, Iraqi civilians. So I always see is like, that's the cultural difference. They don't, the Al Qaeda will go out of their way to change people and enforce their beliefs on them. I think Taliban, I'm not trying to, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make
Right.
Taliban look anywhere good or anything like that.
Right.
They teamed up with Al Qaeda too. I know that when Al Qaeda was in Afghanistan, I don't know exactly what happened to Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, but I know like Taliban pretty much
I think,
continue to fight, because we weren't there for Taliban.
right. It just,
That's the thing. That's what I was trying to get at too. We didn't go into Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. They're already there.
right.
We went there to get to Al Qaeda.
Right. And I think most of Al Qaeda moved to Pakistan. A lot of them moved to Pakistan, and that's why it became such a. I don't know. I didn't really study the beginning of the war as much, but from what I remember, I think a lot of the protractedness of the war is because of that Al Qaeda move to Pakistan, and then the Taliban, more or less just supporting, never denouncing Al Qaeda. So it's always kind of like a get out of our country. Like, we don't care about
you leave
Al Qaeda.
too.
Yeah,
basically,
like everybody
right?
leaves, right?
Yeah.
But
But Osama went to Pakistan. They should just told us, hey,
right.
Osama.
Yeah.
Or maybe we knew. I don't know.
And I don't know. Like, that's not really something that I studied all that much. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, like, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We'll find out.
That we don't know.
We'll find out in 50 years when everything's declassified. But till then, make your bets, right?
Yeah.
I choose not to waste my time with shit that I don't know.
That's just true.
Right. I either find out, I figure it out, or, you know what? I can't control anything in Afghanistan. So I got to move forward.
No need to stress or be angry about something that, first of all, we don't know anything about.
Right.
And also we out of our control.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the two most important resources in human life are time and energy. And where you spend those two things,
it's true,
tells you a lot about what your problems are.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I like that.
Yep. And it's just the reality, right? Like, if you're gonna stress about things you can't control, you can probably pinpoint where your problems are coming from. And yeah,
I look at a lot of Americans today. It's like we technically we have it so good at some point, to a point that we have to create problems.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you see that, right? I mean, I'm always about, you know, getting what you want, you know, but there's also time to step back and see, like, man,
it's not really a problem.
It's not really a problem. I'm creating more problems, if anything.
Yeah.
And you got it good. I'm actually, you know, after many years, like truly happy.
Yeah.
You know, where it's not like forced or anything like that. It's like understanding what emotions are, you know. These understanding, it's understanding everything. It's just like, oh, that's how it works. Right. It's like kind of, but you got to apply. You can't just like learn it and then, because we all know, you know, a lot of people know how things work, but they just forget and then they kind of go. You got to keep applying that thing every day almost, to get it really installed in you.
Yeah,
that's what I've been doing with a lot of meditating and stuff like that. So helps a lot with, you know, PTSD and depression and all that.
Absolutely.
All the negative.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the people that I really kind of look up to is a psychiatrist named Bessel van der Kolk. And he wrote a book that always stays on my desk because I recommend it to more people than I can remember. The Body Keeps the Score.
That's cool.
And one of the biggest things that he talks about, he's been helping people overcome trauma for the last 15 years. He's a renowned expert on trauma. Is reconnecting with the body. Because what trauma really does is it creates a disconnection with your body, because it has to, right? Especially when it's unprocessed trauma, right? So when you go through an IED blast, the first thing your body does when it becomes hyper overwhelmed is it says, your amygdala, right, does this for you. It says, we're not going to allow you to think and control your body with logic, right? So it cuts off the connection in neocortex, which is your logic. And it says, the amygdala, I'm in charge. And it presents blood flow to all the extremities that matter, right? Your gross motor skills, right? Like, and it makes you faster, stronger, more able to physically defend yourself.
Mhm.
But we live in a world where physically defending yourself doesn't function,
Mm.
right? Because we're in a society, right? So the ideal way of dealing with your problems would be to discuss and work through them. But when you get overwhelmed, right, when you become traumatized, and this is why PTSD is so prevalent in people, is because it's unprocessed trauma.
Yeah.
Because when you go through trauma and you're not allowed to process it, what happens? What happens is that anything that presents itself, because the body catalogs memories,
Mm.
right? And it catalogs emotions and feelings, is that anything that looks like that trauma that is cataloged within your body, not your mind, your body, right? So it can be temperature, it can be a sound, it can be a smell, it can be a taste, it can be a sight, right? If that's cataloged, your body recognizes that you are in danger. And when you see that yellow car when you're driving down the road because you got in an accident with a yellow car, and you go into hypervigilance mode and PTSD, you're going back into that trauma, but you're not processing it.
Mm.
And you're living in a world where you are safe, but your body's telling you you aren't. And, you know, the biggest problem for me is that we can't process things because we don't know how to talk about them. And that's what I talk about. That's what my message is that this idea of mental health is so taboo and so foreign
Mm-hmm.
that we've created this sense of shame and
Yeah.
guilt for being a burden or being a problem or talking about our problems, because everyone should be selfless and not talk about problems because they're inconvenient. And my thought is that's wrong,
Mm.
because if we dealt with the problems up front right away without judgment and with some kind of empathy and understanding of why these problems persist,
Mm-hmm.
we would solve these problems like that. When we
Yeah.
become a community and we start treating our software, right, our mind and how our mind works, like it's built in tribal times when we had to go
Mm-hmm.
outside and not live in heated and air conditioned homes, right? When we had to fend for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When we start understanding that, we are able to reconnect with our body and allow our bodies to feel safe while also creating the justification and the understanding, right? Like try to understand,
Yeah.
like the understanding between each other to help each other through these things, right? Like veterans are very simple, right? Like we live with unprocessed trauma. We live with unprocessed grief. We live with unprocessed, you know, responsibilities that really are unnatural for our software and our normal culture. And then we come home to a completely different culture and a completely different way of life where nobody knows and nobody understands and nobody can recommend any possible solutions to our problems.
Yeah.
And the problem is we can't talk about it.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
just veterans, you know, it's everybody, but
Everybody.
yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's crazy. The emotions.
Yeah.
I always try to, what thing that I've been recently trying to do is really try to understand, try to separate too, my like thinking and emotions.
Yep.
Because they're two different things, but
Very
together they could, if you don't, you're doing crazy things if you're not, because you could think one thing thoughtfully and make sense, but then your emotions will make you do something else, go the
Absolutely.
other way.
I was talking to I had a consultation the other day, and he was talking to me about these different things I was going through. And one of the things I talked to him about, and one of the things I said to him was, never let your feelings determine your momentum.
Mm.
Because when you do, right, like your feelings are going to lie to you, especially if you've been through trauma, because your feelings are going to say, I'm in danger.
Yeah.
The reality is you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're trying to, you know, achieve something, when you're trying to succeed in something, right, the feelings of failure, the feelings of self-doubt, the feelings of doing it wrong are always going to be present. Even I feel like one of the strongest people mentally that I've ever met, right? and I've done the work to get myself there, I still doubt myself. But then instantly I remember that, like, what I say to myself, like, you know, I practice following my own advice. Otherwise, like, I'm not really giving good advice, right? Like, I have to test my own advice. So, you know, I recognize those feelings. I look at them. Nope. I got to do it. Right. And if it's wrong and my feelings told me they were wrong, whatever, but I want to make sure and I want to test it. Right. Like, I think of things so experimentally that, like, when I'm not sure about things, I actively search for the failure so that I can recognize, you know, that's exactly what I don't want to do. But then I also look at that failure, and if it was exactly what I don't want to do, and I question myself and I say, well, maybe in a different situation that might work. And it's a constant game of, how can I fail in a way that teaches me more about trying? You know?
It's true. I like that.
Because if you get caught in that, you know, I failed, I can't try that again.
Yeah, you won't do it. I mean, that's why, you know, that's the first thing we discussed actually, right? Earlier, failing.
Right.
You have to fail. It's okay. It's okay.
And failing at 7 is completely different at failing at 20 or 31 or 50 or 60, right? Like, I would, if I had the ability to speak to every young person, whether they're, I don't care how old they are, I would literally teach them to fail. Go fail. Go fuck up.
Yeah, try it. Yeah.
Go tell your parents you don't want to be what they want you to be. Because when you are able to fail, when you are openly, like, my son nowadays, I applaud him when he fucking tries something and fails. I'm like, good. What'd you learn? Right? Like, I want to reward him for trying to fail. I want to reward him for succeeding. I want to reward him for trying. I want to reward him for whatever the fuck he wants to do. Because if I'm sitting here trying to tell him who he's got to be, well, guess what? He's not going to be me. I'm his stepdad, first of all. So he's definitely not going to be anything like me. He's going to be like someone else.
Yeah.
But if I tell him who he's got to be, he's never going to look at how he should be for himself. Like, it's one of the biggest things that I have problems with these days is parenting, because parents like to determine the lives of their children because they think they have the right to. And I don't think
they have to, right?
I don't think they fucking do.
Yeah.
When I'm, as a father, I don't have a right to tell my son who he's got to be.
Yeah.
No right. Right. I don't care if I made him. I don't give a fuck. Right. Like, because what I've learned from people throughout my life is that the people that try to determine what's right for you are often the people that you resent the most.
Yeah.
So why would I want to be that for my son?
Yeah.
I
believe, you know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I tell him, I actively tell him, like, I don't want you to give a fuck about what I think of you.
Yeah.
Don't trust me. And I hope he listens.
How old is he?
10.
Nice.
He's smart. He's a good kid.
Yeah.
He's a real good kid.
Yeah, man. Freedom goes all ways, man. As if that's a form of, you know, parents who are very strict, you could call it dictator, like,
yeah.
And that, you know, it kind of, you know, you're installing that, like, blockade, like a wall within themselves that they sort of develop. Because I think I've seen that, you know, I'm very extroverted and I'm very wild and free. But I see that in other people who are a lot of walls within themselves.
Yep.
You know, and they say it's mostly because of how strict their parents were. Yep. My parents weren't strict with me. I mean, I respected them. I mean, like, you know, they didn't just let me do whatever, but they didn't have gloves on,
Right.
they just treated me like almost like a man in a sense, especially growing like after a certain age.
Yeah.
And then once I went to boot camp, forget about it. They
Right.
looked at me as like, well, maybe like as if I was gonna die. I don't know, but they loved that I went to the military. My brother's Marine. So and my sister's a sailor. My brother's a sailor. And my brother-in-law is a sailor. So we're very military family. But yeah, man, you don't want that kind of to anybody, whether you're a parent,
Right.
government, or anybody, name it. You don't
Yeah.
want to hold anybody down.
Right.
And that's what we're doing in a micro level.
Yep.
Same person will probably be like, oh, I don't want tyranny, I want freedom. And the same person will to their kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. There's rules though. Hey,
Right.
can you be home at a certain time?
Right.
I get that, but I'm just, there's a level of strictness that some people that you're talking about has.
There's a difference between tyranny, oppression, that kind of stuff, and accountability.
Yeah.
Right? Because as a kid, you don't know everything. As an adult, you don't know everything, but you know a lot more than a kid does, typically. Right? So when I say, hey, bud, you've got to be home by 9, right? Well, there's a reason for that, right? And I'll give it the reason. Anything I do, when my son asks for a reason, I give him a reason. If I don't have a good reason,
that's true.
Things are negotiable, right? Like, and if he has the ability to prove me wrong, I am willing to listen, because it's pretty rare when, someone steps in and is like, what about this? Because I'm an overthinker. I think about everything. Right.
Oh, yeah,
and it's not that I'm always right. That's not right. But I think on a level that's typically not normal. Right. And what that allows me to do is create simple rules for my son of like, hey, you can do this, but here's your limit. And if he breaks the limit, we got to talk. Right. And it becomes that conversation, and it's the ability where he has the openness to talk to me. He has the ability to express what he wants to express whenever he wants to express it, as long as it's respectful. I'm a human being, you're a human being. I'm always going to treat you with respect. And I've proven that to him. Like, he knows that. Right. There's no interaction where I've ever been hurtful to him. Right. Because I know what that was like. Right. I lived with that when I grew up. And I don't want, he doesn't need to see that. Right.
Yeah.
So I show him the opposite of what I saw, but I also hold him accountable. Like, I'm hard on him. Like, hey, you still have to learn what it means to do this. And this is why we're doing it this way. And if he questions it, go for it. It's just the manner of how he questions it is important, because I'm teaching you how to communicate with adults.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're 10 years old, like, you're closer to adulthood than you are your own birth date. So you have to start learning how to communicate like an adult, and start recognizing when people are not good at communicating, and how to deal with those people, and how to deal with me. Right. So that spectrum. So children are so interesting. Right. And you can learn so much about children by watching how adults turn out.
Oh, it's true. All right.
And if you don't want your children to turn out like yourself, you may want to reevaluate how you think as a person, and determine whether you are actually teaching your child to think your way or the better way. And what I find is typically parents are like, I'm teaching my son or daughter to be me. And I'm like, well, you might want to look at your problem solving.
Yeah.
Because
they're already looking at you, right? Yeah. They're you don't need to teach them to be you, because they're already watching you. And they normally,
right. And that's the thing, is like they like, parents are trying to actively talk to children about how to be different from them. But the problem is, children don't listen by talking, because they don't understand words yet. They watch. Right. And then ipso facto, you've been training your child to be you by just being you. And the reality is like, you need to change yourself. You need to lead by example if you want to change your child. And that's
100%.
That's my little That's my little understanding of parenting.
I'll get there one day.
And I'm learning, right? Every
Yeah.
day.
And we're all learning.
Every day
Yeah.
he teaches me something new.
It's awesome. All right, brother.
Yeah. We tried to end it a half hour ago, but
Oh, did it?
that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's a good conversation. We just keep going, right?
Yeah.
I'll
go forever. I just gotta. My wife's probably gonna want to eat dinner.
I'm getting hungry. I don't know if you've heard my stomach growl for a little bit. Yeah, but that's good, man. This is a good conversation.
Yeah, do it again, brother.
I'm sure we will. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll keep in touch. But here, let me close it out real quick. And this is episode 16. Terry, thanks for joining, man.
Appreciate it.
And everybody else who's been listening intently for the past, I don't even know, hour and a half, 2 hours. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. It's been awesome. I'm looking forward to having more conversations with Terry. We'll probably collaborate on something, I'm sure. Join us whenever I make episode 17. Life's been crazy. We'll see when that is. But we'll see you next time on the Dylan Experience. Take care.
I appreciate it.